What it do? What it do? What it do? It's your boy, Young Semaj. You just tuned into the SEMAJvlog episode 4. And this episode is entitled Black Kings. Black Kings. Yes, sir. So, this episode I want to talk about is basically, I have down here a talk about how this generation, me, I'm a 30-year-old black man. So people of my age and even a little bit older, how this generation, and definitely younger, but how this generation of black men are kings. How we're kings. And so it derived out of this thought that I had about 3 years ago when I really did a deep dive into black history. And before I did this, my understanding of my ancestry as a black person in America was that I was just a slave. I mean, that I came from slave, which is true to a certain extent, but there's a lot more history about Africans and about black people before they were enslaved in America. And so the whole premise of me talking about that is when I was thinking about that, I thought about how it would feel or how it would look for whoever it is, my great, I think it should be about 4 greats maybe, but my ancestor that was on the slave ship that was brought over, who made it to America. I thought about the thought that they would probably have on the ship, which when you do the study of the conditions of slavery, slaves being brought over on the slave ships, that pretty much it was just horrendous and horrible conditions. When you look at that, the attitude of that my ancestor, that slave that was being brought over, that person for first and foremost, but who was being brought over as a slave, if you look at the attitude of them, it had to be a real ambitious, a real hopeful, a real just go-getter attitude, non-loser, non-quit attitude. And so all this to say that if they were to look at me, who I am, and the opportunities that I have as a black man in America, in the same country that they were brought over to, they would probably consider me a king, if it comes down to it. And so what I put down is that time. So the first point I wanted to make about black kings is time. Is we talk about how long it has been. We talk about how long slavery lasted, 400 years. But what we don't talk about is how recently it ended. And so one of the points that I have is in my instance, it would be my great grandfather. So it would just be 2 greats away that was a slave. And one of my other points is that my dad grew up under Jim Crow laws until the age of 10. My father, as a black man in America today, in the year of 2018, my mother, my father, my parents grew up under the Jim Crow laws. And if you don't know the Jim Crow laws, please go study them. But basically, a set of laws, to segregation laws. My dad had to grow up drinking out of a Negro-only, colored-only fountain that was probably not as maintained as a white-only fountain. So when I think about that, and I think about my opportunities and my experiences, I have to call myself a king. I really do. You know what I'm saying? And so The other point that I had down, and this is point 2, overall point, main point 2 is now during this time, even though slavery is so closely hitting us, so closely related, so close in time, there's still one's ability to own. There's one's ability to make something out of oneself. It's I put down here, like I said, I try to be balanced. I put down here that even though systematic racism still exists, from what we can do now as opposed to what our forefathers could do, we're kings. And so once again, even though I don't deny that systemic, I think that's the right term, systemic racism exists, what I do say is that there is still a greater opportunity for us as black people in America, or especially as black men in America, to produce something, to do something, and to have something that is much greater than our forefathers could ever imagine. And so therefore we're kings. Once again, black kings is the topic. And so in the ways that kind of how this has been done is, we know that, let me get some water, H2O. In the ways that we can kind of take advantage of this is the internet. The internet has changed the game, because before the internet, we know that, you know, basically media is controlled by pretty much, you know, a majority of families, and it's controlled by the majority. But when the internet, when YouTube and things like this have come along, they've given us the opportunity as individuals, as you know, the 99%, to definitely share information that wasn't able to be shared before. Okay, and so and you can make a company without a face these days. That was one of the sub points of that point that I put down, is a point A, which is basically the internet, is you can make a company that provides a service or a product or something like that, and nobody ever know what color you are these days. You know what I'm saying? As opposed to back in the day, my father's time and the times before that, to where if you were have a company or do anything like that, you were definitely going to receive some persecution, because your face was there. You had to be there. You were seen. You knew what was going on. They knew what was going on with you. Excuse me, I'm getting a little bit more. Yeah, so now the other point in this is allies. So, you know, you have the internet now, so you can own, you know, you can have the ability to own your own thing. You also have allies. And this is a point that was definitely there. I won't take anything away from that. It definitely had to be there in the time of slavery, even after slavery, even in assistance of getting us to the point that we are now in America. Allies. There had to be white people, people of the opposite race of black people, a collective, the world at times. There had to be these people that come together to help this progression of us being kings. So what I put down is people who know and see and understand what's going on and what happened, and they give you a shot. So these are people who, if you're African American, and you know, write a book, you do a movie, whatever it may be, and you're able to get that check. Of course, it may be other things, you know, that are underlined of to why someone may give you that shot. But ultimately, you can have a shot, you know, to change generational wealth, and that's kind of what I'm talking about in the last point. And I'll go on a little bit more in depth on that. But when you're talking about this, when you're talking about the opportunity, there used to be no opportunity, especially for a slave. There's no opportunity. There's nothing you can do to change the generational wealth of your family as a slave. And then on down, as these Jim Crow laws and stuff like that, it's limited to what you can do. So for me now, being a 30-year-old in 2018, there's more opportunity. Like I said, the system is in place, things are in place, but there's more of an opportunity. Okay, and so I talked about allies. So this is all the points I'm gonna give on that, because like I said, I'm trying to cut these vlogs down. I'm trying to do better. Thank you for the feedback. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for sharing and everything like that, and subscribing. Point number 3 overall. I'm sorry. No, this is point number 3 of this. I do have another point. This is point number 3 under this is point C. Sorry, under point number 2, which is as in this time now we have the ability to own and create our own businesses. Point number 3 in that is make your ancestors proud. I put realize what they went through. Like I talked before about the slave ships, and just the ambition, or what is the word, the determination that it took to make it on the slave ships over here to America. That was a unique personality trait, characteristic that it took to do that, to endure that. There were people who jumped overboard because of the conditions. They'd rather have been eaten by sharks or drowned in the ocean to remain in those conditions. And so put slave ships, I put there were people who even made it over who lived a lifetime of slavery, and their children lived a lifetime of slavery. The senseless murders, people were just murdered for example. You know what I mean? And that, of course, that happens now. We see that in black people versus the police or whatever per se, but we see that in that relationship with black men and the police. We see that senseless murders, but it was crazy during the time of slavery and the generations down until now. And we see the injustices in the government. Like I said, my dad grew up under the Jim Crow laws, and we still know that systematic racism still exists. But in certain areas we're making certain strides, and you can either jump on the bandwagon of that, or you can jump on the bandwagon of complaining. And when I say jump on the bandwagon, I don't mean that in being an Uncle Tom or in a way that is selling your soul. But if there's an opportunity and you can have integrity through the opportunity, you can take that opportunity these days. Okay, wrapping it up, the last thing I said is, as a black king, I made the point of that the times are different, but the times are close. You know what I'm saying? And then number 2, I made the point of our ability to be able to own or create or generate wealth as black people, as individuals in America or individuals in the world. And I gave you some tips on that. And then on point 3 is leave something monetary, but ultimately leave something monumental. So I'm gonna say that again, because always probably my point 3 is probably the most important point in my vlogs. Although all of them are important, I try to save number 3 for the the whammy. But anyway, leave something monetary, but ultimately leave something monumental. And so what I put about that is, since we have these positions and opportunities as black people now, we should seek to leave generational wealth. So I was talking about that. A lot of times we're so focused on having jobs, we're so focused on just following the norm and the common systems that we don't really think about as black people, as just people in general, generational wealth. We're so focused on the now, we don't think about our children and our children's children. And so, since we have these positions now, leave generational wealth. Leave your children some money to, when they have a thought of a business or an idea or a product, that they have the money to go ahead and do that or produce that thing. You know, they have some money to have trial and error, to do things that you never got the chance to do. You know, I just don't understand the point of you know, a parent saying that we had to do such and such, so you got to do such and such. In a certain instance, you don't want your children to have to go through the same things that you went through. And that's what kind of what this whole vlog is coming from, is I see my ancestor, my forefather, when they see me, they're like, yes, thank you, God. You know what I mean? Even though it's not the most ideal circumstances, to them it's like, wow, okay, if this is what I went through to see my great-great-great or my great-great-grandson being able to do that, thank you. Thank you. There's at least some silver lining in the clouds. You know what I'm saying? Excuse me, boys. Anyway, the other point was, but ultimately we should leave a legacy, leave a story of integrity, of extreme courage and extreme service. So ultimately what you should be seeking to do is leave a legacy, leave a story of extreme courage and extreme service. So ultimately, you know, when I look back at my ancestry, and I've recently been able to dial in that a little bit, I look at how some of my ancestors did things that were outside of the norm, that led to a certain benefit that I have now. You know what I'm saying? And like I said, it's not anywhere near what some of the other benefits are if I was a different color, but because they did something different than the status quo of what their parents were doing, or their brothers or sisters or their siblings or their forefathers were doing, because they had the courage to step out and to do that, and ultimately, probably their goal ultimately was their children and their children's children. Like, not only am I wanting more for myself, but I want more for my children and my children's children. Not only do I not want to go through this, but I want my kids to ever have to go through this. And, you know, I'm going through this, and it's a certain level to it that was, you know, that is not as intense as the level before my ancestors who went through it. But my children, I don't want to have to go through it at all. I want them to be able to boom, 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 you know, move how they want to move. And so that's my whole thing on the Black Kings, is to understand that you are, as a black person in America, the first slave, your ancestry, your ancestor that came over and was the first black person, and who you were passed down from that person, because it had to be, you know, a slave, but you were passed down from that person, that person looks at you as a king or as a queen, and to know all these things that we can do because of that. And not just because of that, but in spite of that, in spite of what's happened to us, we can arise and do certain things. And we should do that not only because of us, but because of the generations that passed down. So that's my vlog today, man. Black Kings, look at yourself, man. Look at yourself in the perspective of what how you would be looked at 100 years prior today, or 150 years prior today. Look at the opportunities that you have that you would not have if you were born 100 years or 150 years prior before this time, and seize those opportunities and leave a legacy. Alright, man, it's your boy Young Semaj. I'm out, man. This is vlog number 4, episode number 4, Black Kings. Y'all already know it's the truth.